She set her drink on the table, pulled out the chair across from mine, and sat down like she'd been heading there all along. Then she looked at me directly. Not the glancing, quickly corrected kind of look you get from someone making a polite social choice, but the settled kind, the kind that has already made up its mind. And she said, with the same calm she used for everything, "I've been waiting all night. I have been to 14 company parties in the 6 years I have worked for Aldrich and Moore. I have stood near the drinks table at 11 of them. I have made polite conversation about projects I was not on and colleagues I barely knew, and the catering, which was always from the same place and which always included a mushroom thing that nobody ate but nobody removed. I had developed, over 6 years, a workable strategy for these events. Arrive 20 minutes late, find a table away from the speakers, wait out the 90 minutes the handbook of professional courtesy required, and leave before the dancing started. Vera Huang had just rearranged that strategy entirely, with one sentence from across a small table at a mid-November work party, and I was fairly certain she knew it. "Waiting," I said. "All night," she confirmed. And then she picked up her drink and looked at me like she was waiting to see what I'd do with that. Which was, as I would later consider, a very Vera Huang thing to do. "My name is Owen Mace. I'm 35. I work in data infrastructure at Aldrich and Moore, a mid-size consulting firm. The kind with good coffee and a floor plan designed by someone who had read about open offices in a magazine and taken it as gospel. I sit in a corner of the 3rd floor near a window that faces the building opposite, which is also an office, full of other people I will never meet who are also sitting near windows. I have a plant on my desk, a decent pair of headphones, and the professional reputation of someone who delivers exactly what is required and causes no incidents, which in a consulting firm is a form of excellence that goes largely unannounced. I had poor survival instincts, as I would come to understand, where quiet people were concerned. Vera Huang was a research analyst, 2 floors up. We had been at the same company for 3 years. She had joined when I was in my 3rd year. And we had shared, across those 3 years, a lunch table 6 times, a project meeting twice, an elevator more times than I could count, and the particular unspoken acknowledgement that passes between 2 people in a large office who have each identified the other as someone worth noticing, and have said nothing about it because the structure of the workplace provides no obvious occasion and because both of them are, fundamentally, better at observing than initiating. She was 32. She had dark eyes and the kind of stillness that isn't blankness. The stillness of someone who is taking in a great deal and choosing, carefully, what to put back out. She wore her hair down, usually, and always had a small navy notebook with her. Not the large, purposeful kind, but a pocket-sized thing, the cover worn at the corner from use, that she wrote in at margins and in meetings, and once, during a fire drill while standing on the pavement outside the building in the October cold. I had watched her write 3 lines, cross one out, and write it again, while the safety warden counted us. And I had thought, that is a person with a life happening entirely inside her head, and I would very much like to know what it contains. That was the first moment I understood I was in some degree of trouble. The existing dynamic was proximity without contact. We existed in the same building, on adjacent floors, in the orbit of some of the same meetings and all staff communications and free coffee Fridays. We had spoken properly, the kind of conversation that has weight and goes somewhere, exactly twice. The first time was the lunch table incident, 8 months after she joined. She sat down across from me with a tray and a book and did not attempt conversation, which I respected. But then she read a line, frowned, looked up and said, apparently to the air, since I was the only other person at the table. Do you think ambiguity is a flaw or a feature? I said. In what? She said. Anything. We talked for 40 minutes. I was late back from lunch for the first time in my professional life. I did not regret it. Not regret. The second time was the elevator in February. 30 seconds, glass walls, the view of the atrium below. She was holding the notebook. I said, because something had to be said, and because I had been thinking about the lunch table conversation for 4 months without acting on it. Did you ever decide about ambiguity? She looked at me, almost smiled. Still deciding, she said. The doors opened. She got out. I went up 2 more floors and sat at my desk and thought about the word still for longer than was strictly productive. I am, as I said, better at observing than initiating. This is the generous version. The accurate version is that I had noticed Vera Huang in precise detail for 3 years and had taken no action, which is a structural choice and not an accident, and which I had dressed up in various professional justifications that did not survive serious examination. The party was the firm's end-of-year event. 3rd Thursday of November, same hotel ballroom as always, same catering, same DJ who played the same set list with the confidence of someone who had been told not to take requests. I arrived 22 minutes late, which was within parameters. I found a table near the back wall, under a speaker that had been turned slightly away from us, and I got a drink, and I sat down, and I waited for the professional calendar to advance. The room had the particular energy of 300 people, making the social calculation of whether their standing at work required them to be here and for how long. It smelled of warm catering and something floral from the table arrangements. The lighting was the aggressively warm kind that event planners use to make people feel relaxed, which mostly made everyone look like they were being photographed for a brochure they hadn't agreed to. I had been sitting for 11 minutes when I saw her. She was standing near the far end of the room, not at a table, not in a group, but in the 3 feet of space between the end of the bar and the wall, holding her drink with both hands, watching the room the way she watched things, completely, quietly, like someone cataloging. She was wearing something dark and she had her notebook in her jacket pocket, the corner visible, which was not a surprise. I looked at her. She was not looking in my direction. I looked away. I looked back. She was looking in my direction. I made the social calculation that most people make in that moment, and I looked at the table. I am 35 years old, and I do infrastructure data for a living, and I looked at the table. This was not my finest moment, but it was a very accurate one. For the next 20 minutes, I had 2 conversations I do not remember about things I cannot name. The DJ played something that people who were 3 drinks in seemed to appreciate. The mushroom thing made its expected appearance on a passing tray, and I declined it, as I always had, as I always would. And then Vera Huang sat down across from me and told me she had been waiting all night. I looked at her for a moment after she said it. She looked back, steady, no correction or qualification offered. She was doing the thing she did, taking something in, giving back just enough, waiting for the other person to decide what to do in the space she'd left. She had, I realized, been doing this for 3 years, leaving space, the lunch table ambiguity question, the still deciding, small, precise openings, none of them large enough to walk through without deciding to. Waiting, I said. For this table specifically? For this table specifically, she agreed. The corner of her mouth moved. Not a full smile, the fractional version, the one she used when something was happening that she found genuinely interesting. There are other tables, I said. I know. Less structurally sound ones, perhaps. but available. Owen, she said, not sharply, just landing the name, the way you set something down on purpose. I stopped. She turned her glass once in her hands. We have been at this company together for 3 years. We have. We have had 2 real conversations. I remember them both. She looked at me at that. Something shifted in her expression, not surprise exactly. More like confirmation of a thing she had suspected but wanted to hear stated. The elevator, she said. February, I said, still deciding. You remembered the word. I remembered all of it. She was quiet for a moment. The DJ moved into something slower. Around us, the party continued to make its noise, but it had acquired a certain distance, the way background noise does when something in the foreground becomes the only thing you are actually listening to. She reached into her jacket pocket and set the notebook on the table between us. Not opened, just there. I write things down, she said, when I don't want to forget them. She looked at the notebook, then at me. I've written down a surprising number of things that involve you. That sentence did something quiet to the room. I looked at the notebook. Small, navy, the corner worn from use. I had watched her write in it outside during a fire drill. I had noticed it in her pocket in every elevator we'd shared for 3 years. I had told myself it was simply the detail of someone I happened to observe as a byproduct of sitting on the same floor and taking the same routes. I had poor survival instincts where quiet people were concerned. I believe I've mentioned this. I notice things, I said. That's the job, more or less. Patterns. What belongs and what doesn't. Yes, she said. I noticed you 8 months in, at the lunch table. I know, she said. I sat there because you were the only person in the room who was reading. I thought about this. The book was a prop, I said. The question was real. What did you decide about ambiguity? She held my gaze, not looking away, not looking away. I decided it's a feature, she said. If both people are paying enough attention. I could have made a procedural move then, something about getting another drink, or noting the time, or any number of exits that the social architecture of a work party provided. I have, as established, a well-developed instinct for finding exits. I have spent 6 years using them to maintain a professional equilibrium that was, I now understood, its own kind of ambiguity, and not the feature kind. I did not take the exit. I have thought about the elevator for 9 months, I said. Specifically the word still. I made a note of it. Not in a notebook in the way that something sits at the back of things and won't file neatly. She was very still. I didn't do anything with it, I said. Because you were across the floor and we had a working arrangement, and I am better at this part than I am at the next part. I looked at her. But you sat down and told me you'd been waiting all night. Which is not a thing someone says to a colleague they find adequately unremarkable. And I think we are both done pretending we're just 2 people who happen to work near each other. She picked up the notebook, held it for a moment. Then she opened it to a page near the middle, turned it to face me, and pushed it across the table. I looked down. It was a single line, dated in February, the month of the elevator. It said, "Still deciding, but the answer is the same every time I ask." I looked up. She was watching me read it with the specific calm of someone who has been carrying a thing for long enough that setting it down is its own kind of relief. "You wrote this in February," I said. "Yes, that's 9 months ago. I'm aware." "And every time you asked?" "The same answer," she said, quietly, without qualification. I reached across the table, slowly, and turned the notebook back around so it was facing her. Then I left my hand on the table, close to it. An offer rather than a move. She looked at my hand. She looked at me. Then she set the notebook aside and put her hand over mine, gently, in the manner of someone who has decided. The DJ played something we both ignored. The mushroom thing went past on its tray, unclaimed as always. Somewhere behind us, 3 people laughed at something that had nothing to do with us. She said, "I'm going to want to leave soon." "Same," I said. "I've been here 40 minutes and I've hit the socially acceptable ceiling." "I've been here an hour and 12 minutes, she said, "which is why I said all night." I laughed. Not the polite version. The real one, the kind I don't produce regularly, and which surprised me a little, which I believe also surprised her. Because she looked at me the way you look at something you have wanted to verify and have now verified. "Get your coat," I said. She stood, picked up the notebook, tucked it into her jacket pocket. The corner disappeared. "Owen," she said. "Yes?" "You read at lunch parties." She looked at me evenly. "That's why I sat down in the first place, 3 years ago. I'd been watching the room for 20 minutes, and you were the only person who looked like they'd brought their actual self." She went to get her coat. I sat for a moment at the table, in the warm, aggressive lighting, amid the noise of 300 colleagues making their social calculations, and thought about a person writing a single line in a notebook in February and asking herself the same question for 9 months and getting the same answer and saying nothing because they were both, as it turned out, better at noticing than beginning. I went and got my coat. 3 months later, she left the notebook on my desk. Not the old one, a new one, same brand, same size, cover unworn. There was a post-it on the front in her handwriting. "For the things that won't file neatly." I started using it that week. I have filled 40 pages. I haven't told her what most of them say, which she knows, and which she has decided is a feature. A year after the party, when a colleague asked how we'd got together, the colleague had somehow not noticed for 8 months, which is a monument to workplace obliviousness, Vera said. He was sitting alone at the work party, and he looked like the only honest person in the room. I would have said, she sat down and told me she'd been waiting all night, and I believed her immediately. And then she showed me a notebook entry from February, which is 9 months of evidence and a very compelling case. We were both right. Neither of us is wrong about the other. That turned out to be the whole thing. Nothing that happened had appeared from nowhere. It had been accumulating in small notebooks and elevators and lunch tables for 3 years. It just needed one party, one table, and one person willing to be the one who sat down first. What would you have done if someone you'd been quietly noticing at work for years sat down and told you they'd been waiting all night? And have you ever written something down because you weren't ready to say it? And kept asking yourself the question until the answer became impossible to argue with? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.